Hey guys, just wanted to answer a question today that I get asked a lot, and that is, David, should I, as a new real estate investor, should I be a realtor as well? Should I be an agent? Let me cue up the theme song and we'll get into it.
Ever wonder what it's like to be a full-time real estate investor? Not the hype you see on reality TV, but a real person, just like you. I'm David Witt. I'm a full-time real estate investor, flipper, wholesaler, landlord, broker, and a licensed real estate teacher. Follow along with me and I'll give you a glimpse behind the scenes of the easy real estate life, and I'll try and help you along the way to your financial freedom.
Hey guys, so the question is, should you be a real estate agent? Well, if you'd asked me that back in 1990 or 1985, I'd have told you definitely. You've got to be a real estate agent because you have to have access to the MLS to get your data. Well, nowadays that's not quite the way it is. We've got Zillow, we've got realtor.com, all the data is given away to you. You don't really have to be a realtor just to get access to information. So the question then becomes a lot more complex as to whether you should be a real estate agent or not. So let's take a look real quick about what the positives are and what the negatives are. We'll start with the positives. On the positive side of being an agent, it gives you a little more, what's the best way to put it? I wouldn't say respect, but a little more acceptance as knowing what you're talking about by the general public. Doesn't make you special because every other person in the state's probably got a real estate license, but at least they know you took some minimal training. Also, it does give you the opportunity to make some extra money from selling other people's properties and showing properties, things like that. You can also get into getting paid to be a apartment manager, things like that. But it also comes with some downsides. And those downsides start with little things like advertising. As an agent in most municipalities, or most states rather, you actually have to lead with, I'm an agent. You can't just throw up a bandit sign that says, I buy houses, call me, because that's your first point of contact. And I do get some people that try and tell me, no, the first point of contact is when I talk to them on the phone. Well, you can split hairs if you want to, but your state regulatory officials may not feel that way. And that's whose opinion matters. Your opinion doesn't mean anything to those people. And trust me on that. So anytime you throw an advertisement up, you have to lead with that. And people tend to, just from past experience, I can tell you, people tend to think that when you say, I'm an agent, you're just trying to get a listing. So you wind up spending a lot of time explaining to them that no, you're buying it for yourself, and no, you don't want their listing. And then if they ask you a simple question like, what do you think my house is worth? You're kind of in a bad situation, because if you tell them half of what it's really worth and they get you up in front of a jury and say this person lied to me, misled me, or just take you before the ethics board and say that you lied to them and misled them by giving them false information, well, you're in trouble. And it's one thing to, tell someone your opinion when you're not expected to be held above to a higher standard. But when you make something up that's not true and you are held to a higher standard, it can be a real problem for you. So I don't really think it's that big a deal to be an agent. The only time it might come into a real problem is if you don't do your paperwork properly, or you misrepresent yourself as an individual when you're flipping houses. A lot of times people will get into the flipping business or the wholesaling business, put a property under contract, and then jump on Zillow or Craigslist or on the internet and say that they have this house for sale. And that's not true. They don't have a house for sale. They have a contract they'd like to assign. And some of these states' attorneys' offices are starting to look into wholesalers that have websites with 8 or 10, 12 houses on them that they're trying to wholesale, and they're putting out advertisements on the internet and on, street signs and things saying, I have a house for sale, when that constitutes acting as an agent without a license. Because it says that if you're selling the property of another for them, then you have to be an agent. But if you're selling your position on a contract, you're not selling someone else's property. You're selling an interest in a contract. So just keep that in mind, because that's a pitfall that's starting to become more prevalent. But I can't really see where it's going to do you any good to be an agent, other than make you feel better about yourself, and what you know. And it could kind of slow you down in the way that you spend so much time getting your license that you're not out there finding good deals. So if it was me, if I was just starting out right now, I probably would not bother becoming an agent. I would just find some good deals, get them under my belt, and move on. But that's kind of my answer for it. And thanks for listening, and I will talk to you soon. Remember to check me out at davidpwitt.com for more free training and cool stuff. Talk to you later.
To learn more about real estate, check me out at davidpwitt.com for more real estate training, downloads, and pick up a copy of my free book, 10 Steps to Becoming a Real Estate Wholesaling Rockstar.